Welcome to the Workology Podcast, a podcast for the disruptive workplace leader. Join host Jessica Miller-Merrill, founder of Workology.com, as she sits down and gets to the bottom of trends, tools, and case studies for the business leader, HR, and recruiting professional who is tired of the status quo. Now here's Jessica with this episode of Workology.
Welcome to the Workology Podcast. Workology offers HR certification prep classes for both HRCI and SHRM certification exams. Earlier this year, both SHRM and HRCI temporarily closed testing centers to adhere to state and federal guidelines to prevent the spread of the coronavirus. Now, some testing centers have opened back up, but a lot of my students have had questions about remote proctoring of the exam and what to expect. Maybe you haven't taken an exam online. Both HRCI and SHRM do offer remote proctoring options for their exam, and whatever exam you signed up for, I wanted to give you access to resources and information to help you ace your HR certification exam. This Workology podcast is sponsored by Workology. For this episode of the Workology podcast, I interviewed Pat Byrd, the Director of Certification Relations with SHRM, and Amy Dufrane. She's the CEO of HRCI, as well as Liz Grater, Director of Certification with HRCI. I wanted to get answers to everything you need to know when it comes to remote proctoring for SHRM and HRCI. This podcast is 2 interviews in one. I dive into some common questions about remote proctoring for HRCI and SHRM certification exams. You can also join our HR certification study group on Facebook to learn more about the remote proctoring process and what to expect. I'm excited to dive into those resources right now on remote proctoring. Pat Byrd is the Director of Certification Relationships with SHRM. Hey, Pat, and welcome to the Workology Podcast.
Thank you, Jessica. I'm excited to be here as well.
Awesome. Well, let's get started. For students who are going to be taking the exam via remote proctor, what does this look like for them? What can they expect?
So for the most part, testing using the remote proctoring option is similar to testing in a test center. And what I mean by that is you get the same test in the same time frame, under the same security conditions, and with the same levels of service and support. The difference is all of this is happening in your home or in any other remote location of your choosing. Now, obviously, this makes for a different experience, because the control of the equipment, internet connectivity, and environmental conditions are on you. What that means is if you need support in any of those areas, you're the one that's going to provide that support. In addition, any assistance that you'll need during testing will be delivered to you virtually. So that's the experience of remote proctor testing.
I wanted to ask you about technology, because normally in the testing center, it's all delivered to us right there, like you were saying. But what type of technology is needed to take the exam via remote proctor?
Okay. And pardon me, I'm going to read from my list because there's a lot of little things that I want to make you aware of. First of all, obviously a desktop or laptop computer. Can be a PC or a Mac with a single monitor, no dual monitors. Now, if you use a Mac, be aware that you may run into some firewall challenges. I own a Mac, and so I know Mac and PC-based platforms often don't play well together. So just be aware that you could run into some challenges in those areas that could interfere with testing. Just want to make sure our Mac users know about that. Because remote proctoring requires audio and visual compatibility, you'll need a microphone and an internal or external webcam. If the webcam is external, it needs to be attached to your computer. That way, when you're working with the proctor, they can have a wide view of your room. Your laptop or desktop has to have a separate power source. And what I mean by that is no docking. So particularly for our laptops. A minimum screen resolution of 1024 by 768 is required. And for the operating system, a Windows 7 or higher or Mac OS 10.13 or higher is required. You also need the current version of Google Chrome as your web browser. And last but not least, reliable and stable internet connectivity. And I really want to stress this because the number one problem when it comes to remote proctor testing is bad internet. So keep that in mind.
No dual monitors.
Correct.
And then no docking stations.
Correct.
Okay, and probably the better recommendation versus working Wi-Fi while you're taking the test is, if you can, to be plugged in directly to your internet using, your wired cord.
Absolutely. You want to get the strongest connection that you possibly can. And that brings me to another little tip. You may want to, on test day, a couple things. Make sure that no one else is streaming or using your internet. You want to make it all yours on that day. And another thing you might do prior is check with your internet service provider to make sure that there isn't going to be any unplanned blackouts or anything like that with your internet. So everything is stable.
Good tips. Now, what happens if while you're taking the exam, you need support? Maybe before the exam or then during the exam, if you have challenges or questions or you're experiencing issues.
Okay, so prior to committing to the option, we ask you to run a systems check. And that's to make sure that your system is compatible with our test administrator's system. If you take the systems check and it turns out your system's not compatible, go take the test in a test center. It's really that simple. If while you're testing you run into problems, a proctor is there to help you. And that's, the name of this whole process is remote proctoring. The proctor is the person is there to observe you through the testing process, but also to provide you with support. So you can reach them obviously through your microphone because they'll be able to talk with you, or via a chat feature that's in the testing platform. Or if you lose full connectivity, then we encourage you to use your smartphone to reach out to them. Now, there are some rules regarding the use of phone. In other words, you can't have your phone in the room with you while you're testing, but if you lose connectivity, then you can leave the room to try to reach out to the proctor. So just keep that in mind.
That's good to know. We have had some other questions from some of our students, and they were asking about during the test, can you have things like maybe scratch paper, or could you go on bathroom breaks during your exam via remote proctoring?
So again, the rules from remote proctoring aren't that different than as in-person testing. As it relates to scratch paper, you're allowed to use scratch paper, but there are rules regarding the use. For instance, only 2 sheets. And once the test is done, there is a process that the proctor will ask you to go through to destroy those notes. So just kind of keep that in mind, that you'll be walked through that. Now, I have some sort of a news flash for you. Coming very soon, just for remote proctoring, we'll be doing away with scratch paper and providing a scratch pad through the platform instead. So that way you don't have to bring any paper in. The pad is available through the platform, and anything you want to write on it, you can. When the test is over, you close down your browser, all of that goes away. As it relates to breaks, and we've had this question as well, use of headphones or headsets and things like reading out loud. Again, the exact same rules as in a test center. You're permitted 1 15-minute optional break at any time during the exam. Just be aware that the clock keeps ticking when you take that break. In the remote proctored situation, in order to take the break, you need to notify the proctor so that the proctor knows that you need to leave the room. So everything will be square. You leave, you come back from your break, and then the test is resumed. With respect to headphones and headsets, headphones are allowed, headsets are allowed as long as they are fully functional. And what I mean by that is you can hear the proctor and the proctor can hear you.
Fair.
And then last but not least, some people have asked the question about sort of talking out loud, asking the questions out loud. Unfortunately, that is not permitted. So no out talking to yourself out loud or whispering the questions, none of that is permitted.
Okay, that's good to know because we've had a few students who do like that method. So they'll just need to practice that before the exam and not be reading questions aloud.
Yeah.
So once they take their exam and they have completed it, do students receive a preliminary pass or fail once they're done?
Absolutely. Same as in-person testing. When the test is finished, you get this preliminary results, providing you with a pass or fail. And then you get your final results approximately 4 to 6 weeks after that period.
Is there anything else I missed that maybe you'd like to share?
Yeah, just a few words of advice. So keep in mind that remote proctoring isn't for everyone. And deciding if it's right for you requires some consideration beyond the obvious technical and environmental factors. If you're the type person that is self-reliant, tech savvy, and can exercise a degree of tolerance and patience if minor technical glitches should arise, and I got to tell you, we know technology, it often happens, then this might be the option for you. On the other hand, if you prefer a more controlled situation where all you have to do is get to the test center, check in, sit down, and test, then you're going to want to go to an in-person test center.
Let's take a reset. This is Jessica Miller Merrill, and you are listening to the Workology podcast sponsored by Workology. We're talking about remote proctoring HR exams with SHRM and HRCI. Are you studying for your HRCI or SHRM exams? Join our free HR certification study group on Facebook. Search for HR Certification Study Group or go to hrcertificationstudygroup.com. Ace your HR exams with the HR Certification Study Group. There are some small differences and nuances between SHRM and HRCI. I'm excited to welcome Amy Dufrane, CEO of HRCI, and Liz Grater, the Director of Certification with HRCI, to get answers to everything you need to know about taking the HRCI exam remotely. Welcome to the Workology podcast, Amy.
Thanks, Jessica. Liz and I are really excited to be here to talk about our favorite topic, HRCI. We, as many of you know, we've been in the certification and learning space for about 45 years. This year we're celebrating our 45th anniversary, and we are strong and proud and growing with the HR profession and changing with the HR profession. And we had already been in the process of standing up our remote online proctor exam with our vendor, and it just got amplified and accelerated a little bit quicker due to the pandemic. And we're really proud that we have we were the first HR certification program to stand up our process online. We stood it up in May. We have been adding programs. We just added on July 1st our California certification to the online proctored process. And we have had very few hiccups in standing this up. I know that doesn't hold true with other organizations out there that offer HR certification online proctored exams. We've had zero issues, and that's attesting to the credibility and the high standards that we place not only on ourselves, but that the HR profession asks us to have are those standards to make sure that we're meeting with what organizations are looking for. And Liz was kind of the engine behind standing up our online exams, and has lots of answers to the questions, because this is, a lot of people were learning and expecting to go into a physical testing center. So they were sort of understanding and kind of had prepped themselves to do that. And then everything changed, not just online proctor, but many things in the HR profession have been changing during this pandemic. So anyway, this has been, I think, a time for us to exhibit our agility as an organization and in responsiveness to what our certificates are looking for in order to stand up our exams.
Awesome. Well, I'm so excited that you guys are here, and we've had a lot of our students submitted questions and community who has a whole host of questions. Before we get started, I did just want to make sure to welcome Liz Grater. She's the Director of Certification with HRCI, so she's also here. Amy alluded to her a little bit, so welcome, Liz.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Awesome. So let's dive into some questions. First, Amy kind of set the stage for the why behind remote proctoring, and then how you guys have rolled it out. I wanted to just on a basic level for students who are taking the exam and they have signed up for a remote proctor with HRCI, what can they expect? What will the experience be like?
Sure. Well, it's a live proctored situation, so they're going to expect to be on camera for the duration of their testing session. So it does require that webcam portion of it. Everything is taken at home on a personal computer of some kind, and so they'll want to make sure that they can prep their computer, do a system test beforehand, and we've got all the links and information to do that on our website. On the testing day, a candidate can log in up to 30 minutes before a scheduled appointment time. And the check-in process usually only takes maybe about 10-15 minutes, but you can log in, just sort of get settled, get into your space up to 30 minutes before a scheduled appointment. There is an online check-in process. So it's a little obviously different than what happens at a testing center, but sort of the same, similar in the same way. It's that you're going to need a photo identification. So you'll be expected to take a picture of, driver's license, passport, whatever your approved photo is, and a headshot. And then they'll need to also take 4 photos of the testing space. And that's just to make sure there's no, books or cell phones or additional computers, things, study notes, things that a student could access during the exam. And those get reviewed by sort of behind the scenes. And if there's any question, a greeter will come on, that's a Pearson VUE employee, to say, oh, is that a book on your desk? Can you please move the book out of arm's reach? That sort of thing. And then once those photos are approved, they get released to a proctor to start their exam. It's important to remember, candidates should plan to test in sort of a private, quiet space, free from interruptions. That sort of goes without saying. You want as little distraction as possible. But you don't, sitting in a coffee shop is not going to be an option to take an exam. It does need to be private. You don't want additional people kind of coming into the room while you're testing.
Wouldn't be allowed to have a can of water. You have to have a clear water glass. So there's lots of sort of things that you need to have so you can have it. You just need to make sure that you're following the guidelines that are put in place.
When it comes to technology, you talked about computer, we talked about webcam, and obviously the internet. Is there any technology requirement that I'm missing for remote proctoring? What else?
Those are the basics. Computer, webcam, and internet are the sort of basic requirements. There are more detailed requirements around those things. So there is, minimum operating system on your computer, minimum internet speeds, certain internet browsers are supported. So there are some more detailed technical requirements. And again, those can be accessed from our webpage for those who are interested in learning more about that. So it does get sort of into the nitty gritty a little bit, but the basic most, a computer or laptop is going to meet, for the most part, any computer is really going to meet those requirements. So it's computer, webcam, internet are the real basics. And you can run a system test anytime. There's an option to run it just to sort of, if you want to test your at-home computer, test your internet speed, you can run a system test just to make sure that it meets those basic requirements before you even schedule or take the exam. And I would also say, recommend that candidates if it's available, use a personal computer versus one that might be issued by their employer. And company issued laptops can sometimes have firewalls or other security tools in place that could potentially sort of interrupt or make it difficult to run some of the online proctoring technology. So if it's an option, would recommend using a personal computer. And if that's not an option, just talking to, if somebody's going to be testing on a company computer, just check with your IT department beforehand and just make sure, everything's kind of checked in advance so that there's no anxiety or issues on test delivery day.
So let's say that somebody did have maybe some questions or needed some support. Can you talk about the different support that you guys provide before and then during the exam in the event that maybe somebody has a problem with internet speed or questions aren't loading correctly?
Yeah, the first thing that we provide to sort of help people prepare and answer questions is we have a really great detailed FAQ document on our website. We spent a lot of time before we launched online testing trying to think through what are not just the top 5 or 10 questions, but what are all the really detailed things that people are going to want to know and understand about this process. So that FAQ document on our website, it's on our online testing page, is a really wonderful resource that I would encourage anyone to read, because it just goes into a lot of detail about what to expect kind of before, during, and after testing. Our customer experience team is always available. They have been fielding calls and emails. They are happy to talk through if people have questions about their testing space or about their computer, or what the process looks like, what they have to do to check in. Our CX team is always available, so anybody can call or email anytime, and they'll be happy to kind of talk through that. If there is a technology issue or a question, something happens during testing, so somebody might already be in the process and their internet goes down or something happens. The system itself, the OnView system itself, if there's, for example, an internet interruption, will try to reconnect with the candidate automatically. There is a Proctor that is available. So if a question freezes or a candidate, it's not advancing while they're testing, candidates can access that Proctor either through a chat feature, a live chat feature that is available during testing, or they can also communicate with the Proctor directly through their laptop microphone. So they'll have that option during the actual exam delivery process. And if something happens that, for whatever reason, the exam can't be reconnected on that day, the Proctor can either open a case with Pearson VUE for that candidate and to have it, have that case looked into and resolved and rescheduled. But I will say also, we have an amazing customer experience team. So if there is, again, an issue on test day and someone is not able to test for any reason, just call or email our team. We are happy to help if we need to reschedule someone, look into a case. Sometimes wait times for calling the Pearson VUE call center are a little longer than normal right now, just because there's been such a huge number of people impacted by test center closures and this huge move to online testing. So if for some reason somebody can't reach someone at Pearson VUE right away, definitely get in touch with us. We will, no matter what. If there's any kind of issue, our CX team will be on top of it, and we'll work directly with any candidates if needed to get them rescheduled if that becomes necessary.
Now, what about things like noise canceling headphones? That's been another question from some of our students. Can they wear those during the exam?
They cannot. So if there are headphones or anything like that, they'll be asked to remove those as well.
Okay, and then I'm assuming that dual monitors and like docking stations are also not allowed.
Correct. Yep.
Okay. One other question we have from a student is they wanted to know if they could, well, I guess we have two, standing up and down. Can they stand up and move around, or they need to stay in like a fixed location?
They should mostly stay in a fixed location. That doesn't mean you can't sort of move around in your chair a bit, stretch a little bit, but you don't want to sort of get up and walk around the room or leave the view of the webcam.
Okay.
So I don't want someone to think they, physically cannot move during the exam. Certainly stretch from the chair, move around a little bit, but making sure to stay in view of their webcam and not kind of get up and actually walk around the room.
Last question from one of our students is reading the questions aloud. Is that something that they're able to do with you guys?
They are not. Okay. That will get, if the Proctor hears somebody speaking out loud, they'll sort of interrupt and say, excuse me, you might be reading the questions. Please don't do that out loud.
Okay. It's sometimes you don't even know you're reading them out loud. So it's good that the Proctor's there and can kind of gently remind you.
Yep.
Another question that I wanted to ask is, once you've completed the exam, do you receive a preliminary pass or fail after the exam's complete, or do you have to wait the 4 to 6 weeks?
You don't have to wait nearly that long. You won't receive a preliminary score when you complete the exam in the same way that you do at a test center. Again, if anybody's taken one of our exams at a test center, they know that you get a printed score report on your way out the door. The printed score report isn't immediate on the online exam, but within about an hour or so after testing, they can log into their HRCI account and they'll see an exam result there. And also within 24 to 48 hours, they'll also get an email from Pearson VUE notifying them that their web-based score report is available. So it's, they can log into their HRCI account or wait for that Pearson VUE email, but either way, they'll be able to get, it's not immediate upon, the moment you hit the end exam button, but you can still get pretty much a same day result.
And do you see when you get that report, is it just a pass report, or or a fail report, or does it have more detailed information regardless of the outcome of your exam?
Yeah, it'll give you sort of a breakdown of the domains based on the exam that you took. So all of our exams have the exam content outline. So it'll show sort of the breakdown. It's not a domain score, but it's just sort of a general indicator of sort of strengths and weaknesses, how you performed in each of those domains. So it does give a little bit more information than just a simple pass or fail decision.
I think that's awesome, because if you're moving up from the PHR to the SPHR, it'd be nice to have that information, especially if maybe you make the decision to take the test relatively quickly. Whether you're taking an exam remotely with SHRM or HRCI, it's important for you to get familiar with the resources and requirements of either exam. I'll link to some resources in the resources section of this podcast episode so you can check out your technology requirements, learn how to make an accommodation request, and find out where all the information is so you can learn how to get the support you need, whatever exam that you're taking. I have more resources like this interview available to HR pros who are looking toward certification. You can find out more by joining our HR certification study group on Facebook.